Okay, is everybody ready for some listening? Got some listening ears on? Okay, so the story today is about a little girl named Ruby Bridges. Ruby, her name's Ruby. Did you guys see the coloring sheet? Maybe you want to color in it while I'm telling you the story. Anyway, so when Ruby was 6 years old and she was in the first grade, like many other children, she went to a new school. Ruby's school was called William Frantz Elementary School. It was in the city of New Orleans in the state of Louisiana. And just like other children, Ruby was nervous about the first day of school. She knew everything was going to be different. A new building, new teachers, new rules, new things to learn, new children to play with, and hopefully some new friends. But unlike other children, Ruby didn't go to school by walking or riding in her parents' car or on the school bus. Ruby went to school in a police car. Can you imagine that? Going to school in a police car? Followed by people from her neighborhood to help keep her safe. Ruby walked to the front door of her school surrounded by 4 tall men who had guns and were policemen. Because Ruby wasn't just like other children at that school. She was the only African-American child in the entire school. And some people didn't think she should be there. You see, Ruby started first grade in 1960, which is 60 years ago. In some parts of our country, children with different skin colors went to different schools. There were schools for children with dark skin and schools for children with light skin. And they called this segregation, where they separated the children based on the color of their skin. Some people liked segregation, but many people knew it wasn't fair. The schools for white children always had more books, better buildings, and lots more of everything than the schools for Black children. Because of that, our government made a law that said all children, no matter what their skin color, can go to the same schools. And that's called integration, where everybody gets together and learns. The parents at William Frantz Elementary School who liked segregation didn't like integration. Because Ruby had dark skin, they thought she didn't belong there. They kept their children home from school, away from Ruby, so that Ruby was all alone in her classroom. No other children were in her class except her teacher. And every day, these people who didn't like integration would go to her school and they would yell horrible, mean things at her, call her names, threaten to poison her. They would throw rocks or eggs or tomatoes, just trying to keep her away from the school. But every day, Ruby Bridges would go to school. She would get dressed and eat breakfast and get ready for school. And her mother would say, "I'm proud of you." And her father would say, "You're my brave little girl." And they would all say, "I love you," to each other. Every day, her neighbors would surround the police car that Ruby was riding in, and the 4 policemen would surround her as she walked through that crowd of angry people to help keep her safe. And every day, Ruby would say a prayer, not for herself, but for others. She prayed that the angry people who yelled at her, asking God to forgive them and to change their minds. When Ruby Bridges was surrounded by hate, she surrounded everyone with love. And after a while, it worked. The next year, when Ruby was 7 and she started second grade, the angry crowd of people wasn't there. She didn't have to ride in a police car. There were no policemen surrounding her. White people did not keep their children home from school, even though Ruby was there. When Ruby went to her classroom on that first day of second grade, there were 20 other children. Some of them had dark skin, some of them had light skin. Some of them turned out to be her friends. Integration had happened, and her school was a school for all children. 50 years ago, Ruby Bridges helped to integrate a school, and integration makes our country more fair for everyone. Today, Ruby Bridges is all grown up, and she travels to schools all over the country telling her story and teaching people to respect and appreciate each other. Each of us can be like Ruby. We can all surround each other with love. And that is the end of the story.